Aloha and welcome to Cooper Union. Today we'll be looking at the U.S. back in and better at the United Nations, looking at the UNA-USA Engine for Engagement and the Get US Back campaign. I'm fortunate enough today to have two amazing guests, Rachel Pittman, the Executive Director of UNA-USA, with 20,000 Americans and over 200 chapters across the country in communities, campuses, and cities all across the US, and Jordie Hannum, the Executive Director of the Better World Campaign and Senior Director of US-UN Relations at UN Foundation. Rachel, it's so great to have you here because I know we're so busy this week leading up to the Global Engagement Summit that will take place at the UN. It's actually an opportunity for Americans to sort of walk into the halls of the General Assembly. Could you share with us a bit about the Global Engagement Summit and how everyday Americans can participate?
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Josh, for having me. I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak with you and your viewers today. The UNA-USA Global Engagement Summit, it's typically held at the UN headquarters in New York every single year. It's the largest gathering of UN supporters in the country. So we attract all types of people, community leaders, college students, young professionals, subject matter experts, to delve into the mission and the life-saving work of the United Nations. And it's such an incredible moment. When we're at the UN, we have 1,500 Americans that fill up the General Assembly Hall at the UN, and they look into opportunities that individuals and organizations, how they can work with the UN to address critical global issues, from advancing climate action to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals to supporting diversity and inclusion. So it's this great event, but of course with the pandemic, we won't be in the General Assembly Hall. We will be virtual this year. The summit will take place this Friday. So mark your calendars, it's this Friday, February 19th through 20th. So it's going to be a 2-day summit instead of a 1-day summit. I'm so excited because we are opening it up to the public. Usually it's for UNA members, but now that we're virtual, we'll be able to invite individuals who have never experienced UNA before, or they're interested in global issues. We want to encourage them to participate. This year, our theme is From Moments to Movements, Solidarity for Sustainability. And we're going to be highlighting the importance of global cooperation to achieve a better world for everyone, everywhere. It's going to include not just UN officials. We will have UN officials. We will also have change makers, policy makers, just everyday people who are going to be participating in various sessions to talk about how we can build a more sustainable world. The summit itself will have 3 different tracks, which will help one navigate all the different sessions that we will hold. And it's based on UNA's 3 pillars of our mission, which is to mobilize, engage, and to inspire individuals to support the work of the UN. So our Inspire Sessions track, we will be doing these special virtual field visits so people can see the UN out in the field doing the work. We'll look at, we'll have a field visit to Yemen. We will have a field visit that will focus on those refugees in Venezuela that are going to Peru and how the UNFPA is supporting them. And we'll have some other field visits. So that is our Inspire track. We're going to do a track on with education that focuses a lot on the Sustainable Development Goals. And so people can understand how they can not only learn more about the Sustainable Development Goals, but how they can advance them in their own communities. And the Mobilize track, we are all about advocacy, which Jordie is going to talk about soon. We want people to understand how they can take action. Is it, talking to their members of Congress? Is it through art form? There's so many ways that people can take action in supporting the work and being really good advocates in supporting the work for the UN. So the summit is for 2 days. We're very excited. It's going to be in the afternoon, starting at 3 o'clock on Friday, and then it starts on noon on Saturday, 4 hours each. And I really encourage everyone, you can see the great speakers up on the screen, starting with the current US Secretary General Antonio Guterres is going to give our keynote address on Friday. We're so honored to have him. And a lot of great speakers will be participating. So registration is free. And we encourage people to go to unausa.org to register and to participate in the summit, and not just participate where you come in and you watch a session and that's it. We want you to participate, to learn, to network with people in the chat rooms, and then take all that information back to your community and see what you can do to support the UN and to have a more sustainable world. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I think the other exciting part that we'll begin with on Friday is also the affinity groups. I think there's 30-minute sessions where everyday people can get involved and see how they can engage more with UNA USA. Would you maybe share a little bit about some of those affinity groups?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So we're going to allow people to start a little bit early, starting at 11:30 a.m. on Friday. We'll have, like you said, 30-minute sessions with our affinity groups. So they include affinity groups like our humanitarian affinity group, those who are interested in those issues. We have one called UNA Women, interest in gender equality. We have a Pride affinity group. We have the Human Rights affinity group that's led by you, Josh. And there's one more that I'm forgetting, but it's all listed at unausa.org on the Global Engagement website. So definitely come in a little bit early so you can just become comfortable with the summit. It looks like the UN, so we made it really virtual. It looks like you're walking into the UN. You'll be able to visit the library and get some resources while you're there. You'll have the capability to go into a networking room. And we also have exhibitors. There'll be some exhibitors that will be participating that you can communicate with in addition to the plenaries and the summit session. So there's a lot for you can do. And one more thing, Josh, it's on demand. So as soon as a session is over, it's immediately on demand. You don't have to worry that you're gonna miss anything. You'll always have access to it, up to 6 months actually.
All right, so this will be a way for us to engage this Friday and Saturday, but also to go back to those, because those different tracks all happen at the same time, correct? So you can be in your Inspire track, but then also see that there's 1 or 2 other featured discussions and then be able to watch those at a later date.
Absolutely.
Exactly. I was seeing 1 or 2 that I think we might be able to use actually in our courses at the University of Hawaii. And that might also be a way that UNA USA actually allows to be a positive teaching tool, where people could see some of these speakers that they would normally never be able to engage with. And as you said, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, as well as the former Secretary General, I also will believe will be there. Is there maybe 1 or 2 other speakers you want to share that you think are excited about watching?
Oh, wow. So there is Monique Coleman, who is an activist that will be participating, that a lot of people are excited about. Chairman Meeks will be speaking. He chairs the House Foreign Relations Committee. And we have other congressional members, but we also have Henrietta Fore, Executive Director of UNICEF. And I mean, there are other high-level UN officials that will be participating, and also some really neat advocates and influencers that will be participating. So it's a great culmination of individuals that are wanting to support global issues and make a difference. I'm very excited about it.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing about all the individuals and the initiatives that are making impacts at the international level, as well as down to even our islands. And very excited to be there on Friday and Saturday. And now I'd like to welcome Jordie. Jordie, it's great to see you again. Normally we're there in DC doing advocacy work, and I've definitely missed doing that with you. And we're also in an exciting time. We are now really, some people would say Biden's presidency just began with the ending of the impeachment trial and with President's Day. But maybe you could talk a bit about the Biden administration, the first 100 days, and this exciting campaign that's being launched called Get Us Back. Could you share a little bit about that and how everyday people can engage?
Yeah, well, thanks so much. Delighted to be here. And yeah, just briefly, let me explain the Get Us Back campaign, and then I can talk about the importance and some of the really positive things we've seen so far. But the Get Us Back campaign, which is being organized by the Better World Campaign and UNA USA, is meant to raise awareness to policymakers and the public. It's a campaign about restoring what we have lost and fighting for the future. And you can't do that on the sidelines. Of course, as we all know, as the architect of the UN, the US has long championed human rights and global health, self-government, global peace, all of which have been a focus of the UN for decades. But for the last 4 years, the United States has walked away from key principles and positions. And I look forward to talking about that a little today. But in short, though, our absence has opened the door to others, some of whom, like Russia and China, want to advance a very different agenda. And Get Us Back is about pushing back on that agenda like we used to. But it's not only about kind of reclaiming the past, it's about our shared future. The stakes have never been higher than they are right now in terms of climate change, in terms of a global pandemic, in terms of a major retrenchment around human rights, in terms of families across the globe being displaced, okay? And we need to be front and center within the United Nations, whose purpose is to help nations battle the transnational challenges that impact us all. And fundamentally, Get Us Back is about making people aware of the importance of being in the room again, about paying back what we owe the UN, and about having other nations back in solving these complex challenges. So this is something we are reaching out through social media, through our online platforms, to make people aware of the challenges. And many of your listeners may know, but just to briefly kind of go over the list, as it stands right now, we are $1 billion in arrears for peacekeeping alone, okay? And just so folks know what that means we're not reimbursing troop contributing countries for their soldiers' deployments. That's what that means. Of course, we walked away from the Paris Agreement. We stopped funding the UN Population Fund, otherwise known as UNFPA. That's an organization meant to help women give birth. I mean, it plays a very important role. We stopped funding them. Of course, we walked away from the World Health Organization in the middle of the pandemic. Also not as widely known as we refused to join an effort to equitably distribute vaccines across the globe, known as COVAX. We walked out on the Human Rights Council, something you've talked about. We also, not as well known, stopped funding our regular budget contributions to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, whose job is to speak truth to power. We also stopped funding the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees, which their primary job is to run schools for kids in the Middle East. So that's the challenges we face, and there's a lot there. And so, again, the point of this campaign was to raise awareness and to talk about, what needs to be done. If you like, I can stop there. I can talk about some of the things that we've already seen happen.
Yeah, no, I think what's important is that's such a laundry list of moments of really embarrassment, considering the earlier role as a leader. And I think some of the way that you described it, many actions have taken place through executive orders, and we can maybe look at those. I mean, we could break it down. I mean, on the health level with COVID and having the highest numbers in the world, I think we could look at that and go from there. And then it is also the anniversary of the Kyoto Protocol, and we could look at when we're getting back in, because I think it'll be February 20th would be the 30 days. That's the first one. So maybe if we look at those two-headed crises on health and climate, and then we can come back and bring Rachel in as well on the UN Human Rights Council and coming back in, since I believe Blinken announced that February 8th. So we can keep going along those tracks. But there's a lot that we have to do. And that's why it's exciting that civil society, us all can partner to make sure our public policy and our domestic and foreign affairs match together.
Yeah, and civil society has an incredibly important role. I mean, there's been a number of important things that happen. I mean, I just listed a lot, and it's actually remarkable what has transpired over not just a month. So just so folks are aware, the Biden administration has been true to its word. It said on day one that it would rejoin the Paris Agreement, and it did that. okay? And not only did it do that, but it also announced that the US will host a climate summit in April, right? On day one, it said it would re-engage with the World Health Organization and did that. It also sent Dr. Tony Fauci to join a WHO board meeting that was happening, where he stated that the US would also join the WHO kind of co-led effort around global equitable vaccine distribution, again, known as COVAX. And then in subsequent days, we saw the Biden administration said that they would refund the UN Population Fund. Again, that means tens of millions of dollars, 32.5, but that's money to help provide voluntary access to contraceptives, training birth attendants. It also revoked the Mexico City policy, also known as the global gag rule. The Biden administration also lifted the Muslim travel ban. And as you mentioned, Josh, last week, the Biden administration said that it will return to the Human Rights Council as an observer state, and then we'll look into running for a full seat potentially later in the year. I think what's also important is that there was a major speech given by President Biden actually at the State Department. It was his first foreign policy speech. It was important that it took place at the State Department, which was really decimated during the Trump administration. But in it, he stated that, quote, diplomacy is back and will be the center of our foreign policy. And he pledged to renew our role in international institutions. And he announced a number of steps as part of that speech, but stepping up our diplomacy to end the war in Yemen, and highlighted the UN's efforts there, right? President Biden said he would sign an executive order to restore a refugee admissions program to meet the need. I mean, this will allow the US to raise its refugee admissions back to 125,000, which is, where it traditionally was. In fact, it was President Reagan who kind of got it started, and the number used to be higher. A lot of folks don't know that the Trump administration basically cut our refugee admissions to close to zero, right? So this is incredibly important. During that speech, also issued a presidential memorandum to reinvigorate our leadership on international LGBT rights, and also steps about reinvigorating State Department and USAID. And he also kind of closed in just talking about the connection, the nexus between our foreign policy and our domestic policy. And when we invest in new economies, when we invest in health systems, we reduce the risk of pandemics hitting our own shores, and we ensure that we're protected here as well. And America can no longer afford to be absent on the world stage. It was really important. And it was key because these words are important, but part of Get Us Back is about actions as well, right? And so what we've seen from the administration is that, in the last week, they said, not only are we going to reengage with WHO, but they just announced that they'll pay back the $208 million we owe the organization, arrears which go back to 2018. And so really important. They also announced as part of the COVID-19 rescue package, which you mentioned, right? So they called for $11 billion to support international health and humanitarian response. So to this point, I'm not sure if your listeners knows, the US has provided almost nothing to the international response. If we did kind of a poll, I'm sure people would be like, oh, well, maybe it was 10% or 5%, 1%, 0.1%. That's how much the US. So this is incredibly important. As we know, if we don't deal with it abroad, it's just going to keep coming back here. They also pledged to fulfill our commitments to the WHO and G7 and G20. So, the Get Us Back campaign is really about kind of highlighting the number of challenges. We've also seen a lot of progress, but also raising awareness about what still needs to happen. Because if we're not paying back, then other countries will kind of continue to portray the U.S. as uninterested in helping, and that's what we've seen. And so, we really need to demonstrate a commitment to investing more in multilateral bodies so they can more effectively push back against common threats and challenges, which helps us, and I mean that us, both in terms of the United States and as global citizens. I mean, that's really what this is about. And happy to talk more on the climate side, but that's what really Get Us Back means. It's not just the US, it's about our role in the world.
And that's where UNA USA comes in, because we still have a lot of work to do. We still have to advocate to Congress to tell them that we need to pass these bills. We need to get more funding for the UN. So it's really important that we work with our members to understand the issues of what's going on with climate change and gender equality issues and education and so forth, so that we can communicate that to members of Congress as they are putting together the upcoming budgets. So that's so important that you have grassroots advocates that are as constituents talking to their members of Congress about this. So we say don't get comfortable because we have a new administration that supports the work of the UN. That's great, but we still need to work with Congress as well.
I agree, and that's actually the part that we were going to get into in our closing element of this engagement discussion. Is that's the exciting part, is what can we, when we go to the engagement summit, that gives us all the information to then be able to be informed, but then how can we then hopefully influence in our cities, across our country, and then in the global arena to partner along with that Sustainable Development Goal 17 of partnerships. How can we then coordinate and do more? And I think one of the first opportunities that comes up will be the Human Rights Council. That'll start next week, February 22nd. There's, I believe, a handful of opportunities to participate. I know one will be Resolution 43-1 that looks at the important issue of police violence and systemic racism. And I know, Rachel, we hosted a national consultation, and I know you're excited about speaking on that issue. And you're also the first woman, African-American woman, to be the head of UNA USA. So a historic first, especially.
I'm a first too.
That's right. Yes. First and not the last, right? And
that's
so
right.
It's important that you'll be able to speak coming up at that session at the Human Rights Council on Resolution 43-1, but also the adoption of the Universal Periodic Review. That'll take place. And maybe you could share a bit about how that consultation went and how UNA USA is being active on really, I guess, putting the articles of the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination into action. But it also points out how Biden just pointed out in his inauguration, we want to lead not by the power of example, but by the example. Or we do it the way we believe it. The ends and the means meet each other. And I think I mixed that back up. But it's important that we're leading by the example and not just by the power and claiming we're the city on the hill. So maybe you could share a bit about that.
Yeah, and what's so great about being a member of UNA USA is we have opportunity as civil society to give input into the UN. So as part of the UN 75th anniversary, we participated in global consultation so we can talk about the future we want. And one of those consultations was focusing on systemic racism. And we discussed as, everyday citizens in the US, how we're being affected, how our communities are being affected. And we put together a report and submitted that to the UN. So we have these opportunities every now and then to engage not just our members. I would say we also bring in other individuals within our communities to provide feedback as well. And we will write that up and sometimes get to have the opportunity to actually speak in front of councils and so forth with the UN. So it's just another great opportunity that we have.
Thank you. And it will begin February 22nd. We also, maybe Jordie, we could also discuss, that's where the US has said they will come back to the council. So that first week is actually the high level segment where normally countries send their head of state or their attorney general or secretary of state, foreign ministers. Any word on if the US will send a high level person? It's exciting now because it's not too hard of a push in the sense that they can give a speech and send a video as opposed to going there. And maybe you could share a bit about how the US will re-engage at the Human Rights Council and next steps along those lines. And maybe our potential US ambassador to the UN.
Yeah, so Lotte, I mean, we haven't heard yet, but I think important for folks to know, right, that the U.S. walked away from its position on the Human Rights Council. The first country to do that just in the middle of its session, which a sad history. And so the U.S. cannot just kind of walk back into its seat. Its seat has been taken. So they've said that there'll be an observer state. What was really positive is how soon this announcement was made. I mean, obviously there's a lot happening right now in terms of course, the COVID-19 and you name it. The fact that this quickly Secretary Blinken talked about is a really good sign. So they haven't announced who would be there, but I would expect it to be high level because how quickly they made this announcement. I mean, it was basically coupled right around this major foreign policy speech about engagement. So that's really positive. I think they recognize that it's within the human rights sphere where we have seen the US absence most troubling. And that's where other countries, I named China and Russia. I mean, in some cases, China has paid more in the UN, supported more for peacekeeping. That's a good thing. What's happening in human rights is very concerning because it's a push away from what the US has always championed is kind of universal human rights, and China saying, no, we should kind of focus on sovereignty. And so, you know, there has not been a takeover of China at the UN, but they certainly have more influence. And they're using it particularly in the human rights sphere to push a very different philosophy. And the US is literally not in the room. And so the US has got to be there and work with our allies as we've traditionally done. So I would expect it to be high level. And I think this is also something that we can really rally, you know, Republicans and Democrats, because human rights has traditionally been a bipartisan issue. And it's, you know, it's important through our grassroots arm to make, you know, to make people aware about what, you know, what's happening. They're not, you know, we are, as we're knowledgeable about the UN and the Council, but a lot of folks aren't. But, you know, at the end of the day, the Council is about is a forum to give voice, you know, to those who are often voiceless. It's really important. So it's really important that the US be there. It's really important that these meetings happen. And it's really important that the US, you know, champion principles and positions that we have traditionally. So that's part of where civil society can come in. That's part of Get Us Back is like, we need to show members of Congress that the US should be there, that the US, I mean, you know, over the last, you know, 4 years, we haven't paid, you know, our dues to the Human Rights Council. We've cut off funding, again, our regular budget dues to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I mean, you know, we need to restore that funding and we need to be there.
That's great. And the good news is we civil society, we were there in the room when the US did withdraw, but we civil society have never left.
That's right.
That's important. And also China was not as effective in Russia as they hoped to because Fiji still won the presidency.
That's right.
And so while the US is only an observer, they can run again for next year and we civil society can push a strong pledge to make sure they uphold human rights. And in our final minute, Rachel, any final exciting words about why we should go to GES as our first steps to get us back and also for everyday people to engage at the UN?
Well, first of all, it's free. No. That's always the most exciting part about it. But yeah, we have just an incredible lineup. Like you said, we have the current Secretary General, the former Secretary General, and just high-level speakers that are going to give us really great information, current information that we can take back to our communities to be better advocates. And we do have one surprise coming up, but I can't mention it yet. So continue to watch. Yes, continue to follow us at UNA USA on Twitter, and you will find out very shortly within 24 hours. So there are some great moments that are coming up to the summit, and I don't want anyone to miss out on it. So definitely register.
Thank you so much. And it is exciting because you won't have to catch that late United flight and arrive early. You can stay in Hawaii and you can still engage.
I'm jealous.
In New York, and then still be able to be partnering with Better World Campaign and UNA USA to make sure our Congress knows what we all care about. So thank you so much for joining Cooper Union. We really appreciate both of you sharing about the Global Engagement Summit and the Get US Back. And we look forward to bringing you both back soon. Mahalo.